Yep. Hello everyone. It's Jerome Sewell. I'm here from Unique Talent. Good to be back on Instagram, and good to see all of you. I hope everyone's been staying safe, staying well, and during this, the third lockdown that we've actually been through in England, it's probably been tough for a lot of us, and we just want to get back to some normality. Let's hope April, helps us. All with that. Yeah. Hi, Post Taekwondo Academy. Hello. Good to see you. Right, guys. So today we've got kind of an interview with Faye Pierce. You may have seen him before. He's been on. Hey James. Yeah. He's been on our Instagram before, but today he's going to be a bit more topical than the last time. So we're going to be discussing self-defense and volatile situations that people may encounter whilst they're in the community. I should make it clear from this point, we are not advising anyone to follow any recommendations in this workshop. And if you are approached by anything like a knife, you should run first. And if you seek to learn self-defense, you must do that from a trained instructor. Don't go into that kind of conflict or engagement not having any kind of training or knowing what to do. We'd like to clarify that, and we'll remind you of that, really, that is what we're about. So yeah, it looks like Faye's going to join us, so that's good. Hey Faye, how's it going?
Everything's good. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good.
That's good to
Yeah.
hear.
How's it been going during this third lockdown that we've encountered?
During this lockdown, it's actually been we've had to just find another way. Your camera is on the side. Is that for me,
Yeah,
James? Or...
yeah. I was wondering that because
Okay.
I saw it. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So during this lockdown, what we actually managed to do is find an alternative way to teach. So what we've done is actually we've added our online function to our system, meaning that we can actually teach our students online. So
Excellent.
during that time, it's been okay. We found our challenges, we found things that work, but I really feel like we've made it work to find a system that actually makes it beneficial for the children that I'm teaching, so they can go on and learn Taekwondo and learn self-defense from their own safety of their own homes. So yeah.
No, that's fantastic. I mean, but then you kind of given us what you're doing at this time. If you just want to reintroduce yourself to those who haven't seen you on our Instagram before, what do you do and who are you?
Okay, so my name's Faye Pierce, right? And I'm a Taekwondo coach. I'm the head coach of Post Academy Taekwondo. The reason why I got into Taekwondo was from the age of 5. I changed areas, and I've always had like a passion for martial arts. From there, what happened was that I started at a local club. I had a coach that acted as as an amazing coach during that time, and he spotted my talent, and he brought me along to the journey of taking me on from local competitions down to then regional competitions and later on to national competitions. Once I was performing at a great national level from probably around the age of 11 was when I won my first British championship, and I got my black belt at that age as well. I was then selected to be a part of the GB squad for that age. And then from that age, I started to fly to different countries to go and compete and win medals all across the world. I got to a stage where I am now a 2 times Commonwealth medalist, something I forget, European medalist, bronze medalist, and I'm about an 8 times British champion over the series of the years. And now I believe it's now my job to actually give back towards the community all those years and all the experience that I now have to the children that I now teach and to the next generation. I feel like things are very different now. So I do feel like the new generation now needs a mentor to guide them through those steps and show them how to actually be an athlete and be a role model within their community. So in short, that's what I do now.
Fantastic. Thanks a lot for that, Faye. Hey to everyone who's joined us. Hi, Camera Jan. Hey, David. I hope you guys are faring well during this lockdown, and I hope you're staying safe and everything. Your friends and family are well, and those you care about. Yeah. So do you know what, Faye? That was a fantastic introduction, and it just shows. I guess while we're having this workshop with you, because we wanted to talk to you about self-defense and about volatile situations that a lot of young people, unfortunately, do encounter. You know, you are naturally an expert in fighting, because martial arts is a fighting discipline, even though there's a lot more involved with it. But so we wanted your take on this and to get your information. Now, as I said at the beginning of this workshop, this is just information and a discussion table. It's in no way recommendations of what to do in any type of conflict, basically. And I'm sure you have. What would you say to people who do encounter any situation before we begin this?
The first thing I would say that obviously sometimes you are caught in situations where you obviously can't avoid a situation where a weapon might be involved. So what I would then say is find the closest point of safety. Try your best to go to like a public area where people are less confident to do things towards you with a weapon. That would be my first thing. If you're not trained in a certain thing, your first response actually wouldn't be to try and fight. I would say try your best to defend yourself as much as you can, but I wouldn't say go out of your way to try and defend yourself and try and prove something that you know that you're not, you know. And if you do feel like you are a person that can be targeted and you feel like your safety is very important, the best thing to do is actually try to contact a local club. It could be any martial arts club of any style that you like, and you can learn self-defense for those things. And you'll go through the stages of learning how to protect yourself from various things. I would say one of the key components of learning a martial art is confidence building. There's many people that actually might have the capabilities to actually defend themselves and may have the strength to defend themselves, but they're not confident in doing so. They're not confident in standing up for themselves. And I believe that's one aspect that you will find joining a martial art club or joining a martial art that you would find, which is good. So, yeah.
No, listen, thanks a lot for that, Faye. Well, now, look, we're going to begin this interview now. And hi to those who have joined us again. Afrolicious, Alfie, good to see you. So, you know, as you know already, Faye, and as our audience know, Unique Talent is based on lived experience. So throughout, you know, when I question you on certain things around this topic, which is self-defense and violent situations that may occur in our communities, I will reference them against my own situations that I've encountered. And, you know, if you're happy to, you can do the same. But so, you know, I guess I want to start from that lived experience point from the beginning of this interview. So, you know, what violent altercations involving weapons have you faced in your own life?
I would say growing up in South London, Thornton Heath, you tend to see a lot and you can kind of experience a lot. Sometimes I would say you can actually reduce the tension of a situation by sometimes using your words. Sometimes things have escalated. For example, if you had problems in the area, like I had at a certain age, sometimes you'll be involved in an altercation. There have been times of where I have seen somebody that we know that we're not on good terms and they've tried to use a knife against me. And in those situations, it was a kind of a fight at the same time, and I only got scratched on my arm. But I would say that it could have been a lot worse if I didn't know key things, for example, Taekwondo. I think in some people's minds, when they see a martial artist, what they see is like a Jackie Chan of any kind of color, you know, and they expect him to do a madness on the road, you know. But I would say it was the little things that I've learned over the years that allowed me to defend myself and allowed me to make sure that it wasn't as worse as it was, basically. So that's my own example of when someone has tried to use a weapon against me. And I know and there's been other situations where I've had to kind of try to speak to somebody who's trying to use a weapon against somebody else and to let them know that that's not the right thing to do, or to find an alternative towards the situation as the reason why they're not angry and why they were angry, sir.
Yeah, okay. No, that's great. And it's good for our audience to know that you have real experience of the issues that we're covering today in today's workshop. You know, I think that's so essential. And what you describe about what young people go through when they grow up in certain parts of our capital in London is quite real. And, you know, I myself, I've covered workshops and I've explained to people and to universities and to others what we were facing back in those days. And you and I, Faye, you're a bit younger than me, but we're still around the same age catchment where a lot of the gang escalations were going on in our area at the time. And we grew up in the same area, which is Thornton Heath. So, you know, like I've said to people, by the age of 13, 14, many of us in our schools were carrying weapons. And that was just a standard thing, basically. Yeah, and then there was a lot of back then. There was, we had the rise of gangs like DSN and Gypset. Some of them, who became notorious in our areas. A lot of stabbings happened. A lot of people were put on life support. There was some gun violence as well that happened back in those days. A lot of robberies, a lot of crime, and a lot of young people like ourselves, Faye, were facing a lot of things, and unfortunately, they continue to face these things because the statistics show that from Scotland Yard and from the police that knife crime has been rising. It's had a slight dip from the high point, which is around 2014, but it's still continued to rise, and it's still higher actually, and still at an all-time high. I think last year and this year we just saw prolific stabbings happen. About a month or two ago, the news was reporting in Croydon that 10 stabbings happened over the course of a week or so, or something like that. So this is still real for many of our young people.
That's right.
All right then. So listen, thank you for that. So let's get into this basically.
Okay.
So the first question I want to ask you is kind of like regarding the use of weapons in a martial arts sense. What's the difference between fighting with your body and fighting with a weapon? I want to get from you kind of what the differences are in the fighting mechanics between the two.
I think that's a very good question, actually. So in Taekwondo, you're mainly trained to actually learn how to just use your body, not use weapons. Well, my style that I've learned, which is WTF, that's based from South Korea. You learn just to basically rely on your physical aspects. However, there is an ITF version where you do things that are meant to represent maybe things like a sword or like a staff. So yeah, but I would say that that's a very good question. That if you're speaking about the mechanics, about using your body or using a weapon, it depends how well trained you are. I believe that if you know how to use weapons, for example, depending on the martial art that you come from, you kind of learn to understand that that weapon is like an extension of your body, in that sense. However, if you're not really trained, it will just become something that you rely upon. So the second that you don't have that weapon, you'll kind of be defenseless. So you feel like you kind of realize that growing up in certain areas, young people will tell you that, look, I have to carry my knife, or I don't know what to do. I wouldn't know how to defend myself. I'm not confident stepping in certain areas or stepping outside with my knife, because I know that there are certain people that might carry weapons as well, or there might be someone that I see, or anything could happen. So the best way for me to protect myself is for me to have my knife. And if they don't have their knife, they feel defenseless, and that's the truth for many of them.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. So that's what I'd say in regards to that question.
Yeah, no, look, thanks a lot for that, Ben. I think you captivated a lot of things there, and just in regards to like kind of when you said about the weapon being an extension of your body if you're trained, but if you're not trained, being something that you rely on for your own protection, basically. I think it's worth kind of highlighting probably 2 points about this. So, like I said, I'll reference my own experiences. And one time, when I was at school, some boys tried to rob me. Now, I went back into my school. With a weapon at the time, to go and do something. I found at the end of that I wasn't really prepared to use the weapon. And I think it's interesting that whether you actually are going to have the ability to use the weapon, now also whether you can use the weapon constructively or not, actually, to do a certain amount of damage to people. So, for some people, when they are, some people might have something different from a knife, like knuckle dusters or whatever. But the amount of damage they're going to be able to do to you depends on really whether they are able to, they understand that weapon whatsoever, whether they can do anything with it. So just in terms of kind of two parts to this, the mindset in terms of carrying the weapon, and what is it that makes someone use a weapon to devastating effects? Because some young people will stab someone, and there'll only be a scratch or something like that, or a mild wound. Other people will stab someone and then their life will go. So what do you say to that? Like, what's the mindset behind the weapon? And also, what does how do people end up using the weapon in the most devastating ways?
I would say that many people, I'll start off with this, that many people blame knives. It's not guns that kill people. I think it's a bit delayed.
Yeah, it was a bit just then, but it's okay. I can hear you now.
Yeah, I'll say that again. So many people confuse it and think that it's knives that kill people. They think it's guns that kill people. But it's not knives that kill people, and it's not guns either. It's not weapons that kill people. Another person would kill another person. They would just use that weapon to kill that person. So I think the first point that we have to look at is the person, is the people. And I'll stay with a person, and if you look at the individual life of the person and what brings them to the point of where they feel like they should take another person's life, there's a number of reasons why I would do so. And in my experience, I've realized that the first thing that would cause that type of issue is poverty, and that poverty within our communities. Poverty isn't just the lack of money or lack of resources, but poverty first begins as a mindset. And when you grow up in an environment where there's not a lot of resources or opportunities, or someone to show you that there's more to life, or show you that there's exposure, what will happen naturally is that people will begin to fight over small issues. So if you go down to the nitty-gritty parts of the stories, you'll finally realize that the reason why somebody's killed another person is, first of all, because it might be over a girl. It might be over money. It might be over something very small, something very minute. I've had friends that have gone to jail for like 15 odd years over £1,000. £1,000 is not a lot of money, if you know what I'm trying to say, and it's not worth 15 years of your life. So I realized the cause of many things, and the cause of it is, first of all, that mindset that we've grown up in within our communities. For somebody to then, I'll answer this part of the question as well, for somebody to then go to the extent of actually then using a weapon to take somebody's life, I would say is that it was something that's been built up. On some occasions, the person might not have meant it, and they might have just done it as a reaction to the situation. I believe people use the term of fight or flight mode.
Yeah.
And some people, for them to get out of a certain situation, they react in a fighting manner. But afterwards, they suffer the consequences. That's why you see many young people that have done so, they then end up having mental health issues after, because they wouldn't know how to actually cope with such a thing, without finding necessary help. So I would say that it takes a certain heart to then do so. At the same time, things can happen as an accident at the same time. And I feel like what our community sometimes does, and the communities that we've grown up in the areas that we've grown up in, it pushes people to do things that they wouldn't usually do. Because at the end of it, I don't think anybody would actually want to take somebody else's life. If you see somebody that's taken somebody's life at a young age, 9 times out of 10, or I would even say 10 times out of 10, unless they actually have a mental condition, they would reflect upon their time, whether in or out of jail, and you'll realize that they will realize the damage that they've caused to families, the damage that they've caused to friends, the damage that they've caused to communities, and they will realize that the action that they took many years ago, or things that they've done in their past, wasn't the right thing to do. So I would say it comes from a number of factors that would actually take somebody to actually then do so. I feel like somebody that might have carried a knife but might not have used it, some people may call that saying that person in quote wasn't on it. But that person just fundamentally knows that they don't want to do that thing because they can feel the repercussions more. Somebody who's willing to do it might not have the repercussions that's necessarily on their minds. Does that make sense? Yeah. So there's many factors that will contribute towards somebody taking another person's life. But I would first of all say that the foundation of it, first of all, starts up from petty arguments. So when you actually, first of all, look at gang culture, right? Gangs don't actually start off as people just randomly meeting each other and saying, yeah, let's go and cause violence from the city. It doesn't work like that. I know that's how the media may portray it. That's how people may interpret it. But the truth is that gangs are originally birthed from a group of friends that become so close that they're like family. And what you will find is that when I found myself in altercations, I didn't find myself in altercations because I just wanted to get myself there. I found myself in altercations because I wanted to defend a friend. I wanted to get my friend out of trouble. And what would happen is that that's the reason why I would end up in some fights. I would end up in some things growing up in our environment, because you would see people that have gone to prison, people that have died, bad things that's happened to other people. And we're saying that we can't allow that to happen to my friend. And I believe growing up, I believe loyalty was a thing that was very strong in our hearts. It's just that that loyalty led us to do certain things that wasn't right. But that's all we understood at the time, to try and actually help people, to try and help those who are around us, if I'm being honest with you. So yeah, in that sense, I think it comes from a number of factors kind of growing up, I would say.
No.
So yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Thanks a lot for that insight, Ben. And you see, I want to go back on something here, because I'm going to move on to another question now. But I just want to just get your reflection on this particular point, because when it comes to, I want to know first, when you are trained, for example, when you were doing your taekwondo, and there were certain trainings that you underdid which mimics the likeness of a weapon, what was the difference between that type of training and how you were trained to use your body, and for what reason you were supposed to use your body in accordance with being likened to a weapon at that point, with the young people who you described, many of which just feel this is the only way that I can actually like take care of myself right now. Yeah, yeah. And what I really want to get from you is actually, how does that make you, how does that shape the way you will use the weapon and make you fight in a different way? How does your mentality shape the way you fight in that sense?
I would first of all say that in terms of, I think the first thing that happens if you're thinking about something like that is the shaping of the mind. So what I teach my students is that when you're learning Taekwondo, Taekwondo is not then to go and use on somebody else when you're angry. The second that you now have to try and use your physical strength to try and win an argument, you've already lost, because that means that whatever you're trying to put across isn't the right thing, you know? So using your physical strength or using what you've learned in Taekwondo to go and injure somebody else for your own gain isn't the right thing to do. Because if you try to do that in your own life, you only end up losing, you know? So I educate them and teach them that the best way to improve yourself is by sharpening your mind, putting your focus on the correct things. And that if you're ever to use Taekwondo, it's only to be used for self-defense. Even when you start a martial art, most martial arts will give you a license. And within this license, it's basically, especially when you become a black belt or you become an expert within that, you'll be told that you are now classed as a weapon. But the first thing I would say is that the first thing is the shaping of the mind in regards to that. And how can I explain it? Yeah, you will just kind of know, how can I word it? Sorry. You will just kind of know what to do and what to do at the right time. I think in regards to then using a weapon whilst learning. Sorry, give me a second. I'm just trying to gather my thoughts here.
No, that's all right.
Because I want to say it properly. Okay. I think the first weapon is your mind. Let me put it that way. You will know what to do and how to act at the correct time if you have a sharp mind. Somebody that isn't trained and somebody that has a weapon or may have a knife or whatever weapon that they have, if they don't have a sharp mind, they will never be able to use that weapon correctly in order to carry out their things, because many other things are going to be flowing through your mind whilst you're actually in an altercation. So that's the first thing that I would say. That's the first weapon that I would say is your mind. And I think that's the answer to your question, if I am being honest. Yeah, I'll leave it as that.
Okay, that's interesting. So, you know, you would say that fighting in fear clouds people's judgment, and then that affects the way they're going to fight.
Simple as that, really. I was trying to say it like that, but yeah, simple as that.
No, I get you. Yeah, okay. Yeah, no, thank you for that. Yeah, it's very interesting to hear you speak about that. So, I'll go into something else now. How do I put it? When somebody is involved in a fight, what's the experience like for someone? And, you know, what role do your emotions and thoughts play when you are in the middle of a fight, actually?
So I would say for a number of reasons. Growing up, fights are usually instigated from anger. From a place of anger, from a place of embarrassment, for a number of reasons. So whatever emotion that person, because I think the theme of what I've kind of been saying throughout these times is that it's based upon how the individual is and the shaping of the individual's mind. So during a fight, that's what will naturally happen. However, if you've been trained and you've been through many situations of being through a fight, you are most likely going to have a stable mind, meaning that you'll be able to see everything in front of you for what it is. Exactly. If you're a very emotional person, you'll see so many things and you wouldn't be able to actually do the correct things at the right time. So, for example, some people might be fearful, and because you're fearful, it's going to cloud your judgment on how to act in those times. Some people may be angry. That anger is going to cloud your judgment of when to act, and for those reasons. So, I would probably say that there's a combination of different emotions that will go through your mind during that time, and it will differ according to the person. So I can use my experience when I've had an altercation growing up in a certain area, an altercation whilst I'm in the ring fighting for Great Britain. And usually growing up, when you're fighting on road, for example, there's a lot of things that's going through your mind, because when you're a young person, you already know that you're fighting somebody. Anything could happen at any time. You don't know what weapon that they might have. You don't know if you're about to get arrested because of the fight. There's many other questions that's happening during your mind. Whilst in comparison, whilst you're in the ring and you're fighting in a professional level, your aim is to basically look at the objectives of the fight. But the same thing will still apply, because you can still get angry in the ring. You can still be fearful of your opponent. You can still be emotional of whatever's happening. Private things in your private life may affect you. So I'll say that they're quite similar, but I'll say that it goes back to how mentally stable the person is. That will kind of happen. So I think the emotions are different for many different types of people. But I would definitely say you constantly being under pressure, you constantly going through the training and the practicing of being in a fight, for example, is what will allow you to have a more stable mind when this kind of situations happen, because a lot happens. And if you're able to kind of keep your mind stable, you're most likely going to make the correct decisions to defend yourself during that time. So yeah, that's my answer for that.
Yeah, no, that's very interesting, especially when you emphasize consistently what the stability of mind means to how effective you're going to be in a conflict. Once again, I repeat the point: we are not advising anything to anyone. We're having a discussion about this, which is an important one for our communities. Faye, I want to reference a situation to you actually that
Okay.
occurred with me when I was younger. I was around the age of 17 or so. And at the time, I was kind of around my girlfriend's house, and I got into a fight with a group of boys. Well, not a group of boys, two boys actually, who were there. We had a heated discussion, and kind of our egos and temperaments kind of clashed against one another. And then in the midst of that fight, one of the boys tried to pick up a brick and actually come for me with the brick and brick me over the head. I was luckily, unfortunately, I was able to punch him at the time and get the brick out of his hand. I didn't get it out until he dropped it.
Yeah.
And I think it just touches what we're kind of discussing here about somebody's stability of mind when they're in the process of engagement. Now, I'm not talking about mine. I'm talking about his, because the guy who was doing that towards me was armed with a weapon at the time and coming for me with a weapon.
Yeah.
But for whatever reason, he was not an effective user of that weapon, which was my lucky break, because things could have ended up a lot worse. I could have had a concussion and all kinds of things could have happened on that day.
Definitely.
And I just what is your reflection on that actually, and the heat and the moment of engagements, and people being able to effectively respond or not effectively respond, and also the perpetrators or the aggressors at the time not having the ability to go the maximum extent of what they could do in the situation.
Yeah. I'll say that I'll probably start off from the point that you kind of said that when you was having a heated discussion, your egos kind of came up. And I would probably say the ego, there's a major issue within our community to do with egos and pride. And in order to try and prove something, we have to feel like, in our community, growing up, you feel like you have to then use a form of violence to try and dominate the other person. You have to try and use a form of intimidation to try and dominate the other person. And I'll probably say that kind of comes from a place of where you have to learn, growing up in an environment like that, words don't really mean much sometimes. If I'm being honest with you, what kind of means much is how strong a person is. So growing up, you kind of see that the more respected person was the person who's most willing to use the violence or use certain weapons, and or someone that is the strongest, or that's deemed as the strongest, should I say. So I'll kind of start off with there and the ego issue, and it probably stems from there. So usually people would feel like this person is going to try and take the mick of me if I don't do so and so to him. And they now have to try and feel like they have to prove something, not actually understanding that if they could actually articulate themselves well and actually show them, prove themselves to be an intelligent person, that person wouldn't have anything to say anyway, if you get what I'm trying to say. But growing up, you feel like you have to now use your physical side to try and prove a point. So I'll probably say for that person, that's probably where they actually came from. They actually came from a place of where they felt like they needed to prove a point using their physical strength, and that's the reason why they picked up a weapon to try and do so. So they may, like I was saying, they might actually not be someone that's actually been in a lot of fights, but they might be a very emotional person. This is someone that doesn't, again, have a stable mind. So you picked up a brick to try and then obviously attack you, but not being someone that's trained or maybe very strong, you've been able to very easily disarm him. But I'll probably say that the root cause of things like I said, is the pride and the ego. And I wouldn't, to be fair, actually say it's just in our community. I feel like the pride and the ego is just manifested in violence within our community. So that's what I would say, actually.
Yeah, no, it's great to hear that from you, because it's something that I've covered in other workshops with other institutions and stuff, where we have a culture in London actually, and it's not just our communities, the deprived ones or ethnic minority ones or whatever category you put us in. Actually, generally speaking, across London, there is a kind of culture where men prove themselves through violence, and that's a real testament of your manhood. That, you know, as long as you're strong and you can physically fight, then everything's okay. You are a guy. You know, you can kind of do that with your chest.
Yeah.
Whereas the difference with, I guess, our communities and others is that it's taken to the extreme in our communities. Because in some parts of London, that will just mean you have a fight with a guy who tries to talk to your girl at a club. In our parts of London, it means a young person will stab you, basically, what you're going to do to them. And it's the level of violence, isn't it, really? But the cultural problem is everywhere in London and everywhere in the UK, and maybe even beyond the UK, probably.
No, definitely. I definitely think that's a global thing. I think it's just something that's natural in us. Sometimes you get in a heated discussion, you don't know how to express yourself, and you feel like you need to physically do something. I think that's a natural thing within many people. But I say within our community, I think where, for example, you might be in a West End and you might be in a club. And like you gave the example that you might be with your girl or somebody might be with their girl, and a fight might break out, but it might just end there because you two don't really know each other. But I think within our community, because a lot of people live close, and when you actually look at some of what people could beef, people actually live right next door to each other, you know, in an area that's maybe about 10, 15 minutes away. Sometimes that some people can't actually go to the shops in peace because of how close they have their problems. You know, so I think that's when issues reoccur, where somebody feels like, okay, they now need to go and look for this person to now go and retaliate, especially because this person has done something. And if somebody else in close proximity hears that they've done something to me without me retaliating, what you naturally find is that that's how long-term altercations go on. And that's where people will then end up in what we will call beef, or somebody will kill somebody and then it will then go on of friends killing friends. And that's what you was kind of explaining about violence going to the highest extent. And I think that's to do with how close people are as well, and the community, like I was saying, because if something happened between me and you growing up, people will hear about it. And someone will say, oh, for the person that might have gotten beaten up or wasn't able to defend themselves during that time, that person will then, in quote, lose ratings, meaning that people will no longer respect that person and feel like they can then do that thing to that person. So I think it's a natural mechanism for people to then actually, I think their ego was a coping mechanism within our communities, to basically say that, look, I'm not the person that you should try things with. Because growing up in certain places, you then find that it's either eat or be eaten, if I'm being honest with you. So it's a thing where you constantly had to defend yourselves or portray a character that you're someone that's able to do something or not be taken for a joker or be taken for someone that can be taken advantage of. So yeah.
So now the follow-on to that, before I move on again, is actually what do we do about that situation? Because how do I explain it? What role do you see in young people, or not young, young people actually, what are the avenues of escape from young people getting involved in violent situations? You know, giving and bringing into play everything you spoke about, such as the fact that the people that may be seeking the conflict with a weapon or without a weapon may not have the strength of mind actually to carry through with the most devastating side of what they could carry through. So, you know, how do we deal with that? What are the avenues of escape for the young people that are finding themselves in our neighborhoods in this state?
So just to get it clear, are you asking how would somebody avoid getting into violent altercations as in like gang culture? Is that what you're saying?
Not even just gang. I mean, gang culture in the set, yes, but I wouldn't say they have to be a part of a gang. Because many young people, anyway, just like myself, they encounter violent situations and they're not a member of a gang. They just live in an area where it's heavily populated by gangs. And so it's like you said, it's an eat or be eaten kind of thing. And even if you're not a gang member or anything, you still feel like, oh boy, you know, I better know how to handle myself around this place.
Yeah.
And that's what I want your insight on. How do they avoid not only the trap of getting into that, but when they are into that, what works in their favor? And like I said, we're not giving advice, but what works in their favor if they are approached in a violent situation? Because there's a few that we might be able to see from what you said. The fact that the people going against them might not be mentally strong enough to do the worst things to them in the first place. So I just want your insight. What's the solution to that? How do we mitigate the damage? Or what are the mitigating points for young people who are in those situations?
Okay, I think I'll kind of build on from the suggestion that you said at the beginning of this session, and you basically explained that we're actually not giving advice, and if you were in danger of a certain situation, try your best to find help, and that's my main thing. If you know you're not somebody that can actually defend yourself, try your best to go to a public area or run away from the situation, should I say. If you're not strong enough or you know that you're not able to defend yourself, don't try to be a Superman when you know that you're not. I think the number one thing is for people to realize who they are. So you may find in growing up in certain areas is that somebody would want to try and prove a point even though they're not. There's no point of getting yourself involved in a situation that you know that you're not going to be victorious, should I say, to just try and prove a point, especially if somebody has a weapon. So my first thing is that. The second thing I would probably say is that if you know that you would want to defend yourself, I would say, like I said in the beginning, find a local martial arts club, find a place, for example, like a mixed martial arts gym, find a taekwondo gym or a club, find a boxing club, and there's many other martial arts that you probably find in many different areas. I'll definitely say find one of those things and learn how to defend yourself through that. So that would be my thing. Sometimes you may find yourself in a certain situation, like I said, and if you know you're not able to defend yourself, find a public space where people are less confident to then try and use weapons against you. I feel like some people as well, some young people, and this might be good for anybody that's watching, if you end up finding yourself around certain people that you know that you're not, how can I say, not like, if you know certain people are doing a certain thing, and you know that you yourself, you're not really about that life, I wouldn't suggest that you go down that road, because if something was to kick off, you have to ask yourself, would you be prepared? Don't fall into the peer pressure of trying to please people. Be yourself, you know? Don't feel like you need to go and do something bad for people to like you or rate you, you know? In all honesty, when you look down the road, is that people who were looking for the ratings, people who were looking for stripes growing up, they end up being nothing. There's friends who I grew up with, and they were constantly looking for what people will now call clout, to try and always do manners of things to try and prove that they're on it or they're about a certain life. And you now look at their life and they're not where they wanted to be, because their focus was completely misled. They had a complete different focus, and they didn't focus on the things that would actually give them value. They focus on the things that of people's opinions who weren't doing anything or didn't mean anything anyway, you know. So yeah, that would be my thing.
Yeah, no, thanks a lot for that, Ben. I think it's a big thing when you say young people have to learn to just accept being themselves sometimes. And actually, I wish we'd build a culture where their level of aggression they show is not an element of their status as people around in our communities. Like I said, I will move on, but I just want to captivate one particular thing. because you've spoken about the confidence side of martial arts, basically, and that confidence being able to help you to handle yourself. Now,
Yeah.
obviously, someone has to receive instruction to go through that. But can you expand on the confidence side a little bit? And then I'll contrast that with one of my own experiences after you've done that, basically. So
Yeah.
yeah, like, how does the confidence help people? Do you know what I mean? To be able to,
Yeah. Defend
when
themselves.
they do encounter, yeah, yeah.
I would say that no one actually having a better understanding of how to use your body to defend yourself will always give you the confidence of saying, if a situation was to arise, I now know how to then use something. I now know to defend myself. I think knowledge is a very important thing. That's why I think many people in all walks of life, not just fighting or defend yourself, people are more confident. It's like if you have an exam, you're more likely to be very confident walking into that exam and under less stress when you've actually revised because you actually have knowledge of that topic rather than actually going there and actually not knowing what you're doing. So I think it's a natural thing that when you have a certain knowledge or experience in a certain thing, you're more confident on doing something. And I'll use the example of two of my students actually. I had one student who was 10 years old and he was somebody who's quite timid. He would easily cry if something wouldn't happen, it wouldn't go his way. He wouldn't really stand up for himself. And a situation, after a few months with me, a situation happened in school. I think they were playing tag rugby, he was telling me. And what happened was that there was a kid that was kind of like trying to pick on everybody. And the kid now came around and tried to pick on him. And he said that he pushed the kid away and said, look, don't do this. I don't want to fight you. I don't want to do this. And he was confident enough to stand up for himself. The other kid now tried to actually throw a punch and he actually moved back and it kicked the boy in the face and the boy fell down. That's a demonstration of self-defense. Him being confident enough for him to stand up for what he believes is right, before he may have just allowed the kid to do whatever the kid liked. But this time he was confident enough to say, look, stop this. This is not what I like. Don't do this. It's not fair on everybody else or on myself. Another situation occurred where a student where he's 15 and he's a lot smaller to other students. And because of that, a lot of students, and some, I'll be honest, he can be a bit mouthy sometimes. So other students will always try to find a way to try and pick on him because of that reason. And he wouldn't back down because he can be quite mouthy. But what was happening is that many people were trying to actually pick on him and take the mick with him. And on one day, like I said, after maybe about, I wouldn't say, it wasn't even a full year. I'll probably say it's a couple months. After somebody, after training with me, somebody also tried to pick on him. And what was happening is that the kid was trying to punch him and he just kept on moving. And he just picked the boy up and threw the boy on the floor. And he'd done that maybe on a number of occasions. The funny thing is that his friend was recording the altercation at the time. But he was so proud of himself that he realized that, wow, this is someone that after years that someone was picking on me, I was actually now able to be confident enough to actually use what I've learned to actually do so. I believe that he could have possibly done that earlier, but his confidence had built up during training to the point of where he probably didn't think too much about what he was doing. It probably came as like a natural reaction to defend himself, So I feel like it's something that was actually over the months was actually something that was installed inside of him without him knowing that he's actually now more confident. I think just with him having the knowledge, he naturally done so. So I believe that the natural reaction to defend yourself sometimes actually may come from the confidence that's been installed inside of you, And from there, that kid hasn't even tried since. I think that kid that tried to pick on him is even now scared of him, And the funny thing is in that video, he was actually walking away and he's saying, look, I don't want to fight you. But he was clearly demonstrating self-control, exactly like I teach, and self-defense. He could have done a lot more damage to that boy, honestly, seeing the video, but he controlled himself and he demonstrated the correct things, So I would say that's my take on the confidence, building your confidence during that time.
I'm sorry, I find that very fascinating that, the confidence that you can gain from martial arts, but maybe even in other things in life, can actually kind of shape your natural responses to situations. And I think that's a great tool for young people who are able to get that from instructors such as yourself. Like I said, I'm going to reference that really against a situation that I went through in my own life where I describe something in the work that I do, which is called the climate of fear. And it's about an environment when you're in an environment that's constantly dominated by violence that's going on. So, you know, I've spoken about, I spoke earlier in this interview, Faye, about the way Thornton Heath was when we were younger. But, you know,
Yeah.
I've gone very in depth in other interviews into how the area was. And it mimics and reflects many other parts of London, actually, that were deprived at the time. You know, like I
Yeah.
said, most of the people back in those days were put on life support. You
Yeah.
know, there were all kinds of manner of things happening. And I was probably in that scenario, an example of one of the young people that you spoke about earlier on in the interview, that I was pretty, how do I put, I felt that the weapon gave me confidence at the time when I was younger, before I decided
Yeah.
to put them down. And I just find it is a major thing, actually, perhaps for young people in our communities, that if in some way, shape or form they're able to develop the confidence to know they can
Yeah.
walk the street and be safe, then
Yeah.
that would probably de-escalate a lot of weapon carrying and weapon violence that happens on our streets.
Yeah.
And I just think, yeah, it is because, to be honest, I was talking to a colleague about this. I was talking to Christian Douglas about this earlier today, and we were talking about, you know, the what certain candidates for the mayoral elections plan to do about knife crime, basically.
Yeah.
And in our conversation, we were just touching on the facts that if you don't, for me, for example, when I was younger, for me to stop carrying weapons at a certain point, it was only the fear that I could go to prison. And in order, how do I put it? The fear of me going to somewhere like a prison at the time then controlled my response to think, do you know what? I have to walk fearlessly and be prepared to die, actually. It's
Yeah,
either I'm
it's true.
prepared to die. That's how I felt. I just felt I'm either prepared to die or I'm going to prison. So
Yeah.
I need to stop. And and that was my way, but that was probably a very negative way of me getting the confidence, actually, to stop carrying the weapons. Because the
Yeah.
thing is, you know, you've probably come across it. A lot of young people in our communities, they say if a guy's carrying a weapon or if he's using a weapon, he's got heart. But
Yeah.
actually, to put down a weapon when you're in a violent environment that's surrounding you is actually that's when you really do have heart.
No, I agree, and I think even with myself on that note, that there was times where I have carried a weapon before, but my main philosophy was that I don't need to carry a weapon because I'm not scared. That if somebody's going to come and do something, allow them to come and do so. But I saw people that did carry weapons and they didn't have the heart at all towards it, that just towards life. That if they didn't have their weapon, they was a complete different character. They wasn't like wholesome, so they wasn't completely themselves 100% of the time. They acted different because they carried a weapon, if that makes sense. And I agree with you. I think that was just a philosophy that I wouldn't just say it's just you, and I might not say it's a negative thing, but I think it's the natural mindset, a natural response to growing up in certain areas, that you know that anything can happen at any time. And I had friends that had died from a young age as well, and I knew that it was very possible for me to actually die as well, in any situation, if I'm being honest with you. So I wouldn't say that that's a negative mindset. I think it's just the reality of it, because the truth is that anything could have happened at any time, you know, with a weapon and without a weapon. I've seen people die, you know, so anything can literally happen, if I'm being honest with you. But I definitely agree that it's just because you carry a weapon doesn't mean you're on it or you have heart. I think it's more to do with how you live your day-to-day life that would determine if you really have heart or not. I think our focus towards actually what is heart is actually not how much violence you actually want to inflict on a person, but I think it's more in heart about how much you actually how much you would rather defend your community and defend your people, meaning how would you rather uplift them? I think the greatest defense, if I'm being honest with you, isn't necessarily just a weapon, but I think it's actually money, a financial having some finances, should I say? Because if you knew that, for example, if we had more money or we had more money growing up, we wouldn't find ourselves in certain areas or doing certain things, if that makes sense. So I think, speaking in that kind of sense, money is a big thing to actually help a community, because it actually provides the opportunities, and it provides certain platforms that young people can then go on and actually stay away from the roads, to stay away. I think more times that you find altercations when you're not doing anything, if I'm being honest with you. Sometimes things do occur. For example, I was still trying to progress as a professional athlete, but because of my environment, things were found difficult. But I feel like my situation definitely got better because I was on that journey to try and be a professional athlete. But many of my friends didn't have that focus. Many of them didn't have a sport. Many of them didn't have a mentor or something that they were trying to aim for. And because of that reason, what you naturally find is that they were ideal and had nothing to do. But if there were platforms and there were things that are placed into our communities, what you'll find is that there are gonna be less issues or less things that actually do come up or happen, if that makes sense. So yeah, that's my answer to that actually.
Yeah, no, it's great to just to hear you speak, Ben. I think you've given not just me, like both myself and our audience, a great insight into this. We're going to wrap up soon, but
Okay.
there's just a couple of final questions that I really want to get your answers to and your insight on.
Yeah.
Um, so you've touched on this a bit already, but I don't know if there's more you actually want to say about it. Because how do you maintain control of your mind and your emotions when you're in any violent altercation? And how do you actually train your mind and body to respond in an effective way when you're in those situations?
Hmm. I would say it's something that doesn't happen overnight. That's the reality of it. It doesn't happen overnight, and it's through, I would probably say, constant training. And it's training of the mind. So more time when you actually, maybe sometimes when you watch like a martial arts movie, you may see an old Asian man, an old black man sometimes that's sitting there meditating, or he may be very relaxed, that type of thing. And because martial arts actually focuses on the gathering and the focus of the mind, you know. So I think that the best way to train it is actually to start participating in something, you know. Meditation is good as well, but to actually participate in something and actually put yourself in situations where you're going to be forced to think under pressure and do something under pressure is what would allow you to then perform if something was to occur outside whilst you're under pressure. I don't think the pressure changes if you're in or outside, if I'm being honest with you, but you'll just know how to deal with the pressure better, having a greater experience or greater knowledge of what it's like to be under pressure, if that makes sense. So I'll say that if you're going to train your mind, that's the first thing to do. But you understand that it's not just through the kicking and punching that trains your mind. It's by you intentionally understanding that you actually want to change your mind and change the way how you respond to things. So if you know that you're an emotional person, for example, or someone who gets angry very quickly, the first thing that you're going to want to do is actually aim at focusing, okay, how do I get less angry? I was someone that sometimes could be angry growing up. And what taught me to be less angry? Knowing that, okay, the objective that's in front of me right now is actually more important than actually how I feel. So what I then found is that I don't actually have to use my anger to get the result that I desire. And then through that is that through time and time again, that's just something that I've managed to mold and focus my mind on, you know. So I would repeat again, it's not something that happens overnight. It's not after watching a Bruce Lee movie or a Jackie Chan movie that you now can do all things. It's not after even like maybe a month of doing a certain martial art. But I feel like it
So I think Faye is frozen there. Oh, you just come back, Faye. You froze. But by the way, can I take this opportunity to say hi to everyone who's joined us? There's a lot of you, and I've been watching. I've seen you guys join us. Thank you. If you want to post any comments, just post it. Speak. We're having a great discussion here. So Faye, I think we've had a few technical issues on Faye's line. He'll be back. But yeah, listen. Hi Shane. Hi Abby Spin. Hello. This is Steve who's joined us. Tania, Emma Green. Thank you everyone for joining us. Hopefully, Faye will be able to join us again. Faye, can you hear me on your side of the line? It's funny what we encounter with technology nowadays, isn't it? Instagram Live this and Twitter this, and if Wi-Fi conks out, you're screwed, aren't you? Really? But there you go. No, let's see. I think Faye's left us to rejoin. He's gonna come back on. So yeah. Do you know what? I see a lot of waves, a lot of waves. Thank you, everyone. But yeah, it would be great if you guys want to post and just get in on the discussion. Even if you don't want to get in on the discussion, I'm hoping that you're learning from what FaZe is talking to us about, because he is an expert in this, and it's very, very interesting to see his philosophy and to understand his real applicable experience in terms of how you go through you get through certain things, basically, and what's best to do in a certain situation. Very relevant, relevant to young people. Let me see. I'm gonna check whether Faye. I think Faye will rejoin us. Just 1 second. Faye's just come back to us.
Yeah, we're back.
I say, yeah, you're back. Good. That's good. That's good, man.
Yeah. So I'll continue from where I left off. And I believe where was we actually? I think we was talking about the emotions during a time of possibly when you're in a fight, okay, how to train the mind was your question.
Yes.
Yeah, so I was saying, basically, just to reiterate for those who weren't here before, that I think the first thing to do is simply get yourself involved in situations, positive situations. For example, joining a club, joining a martial arts club where you're going to learn how to defend yourself, and you'll be put in certain situations, for example, sparring. In sparring situations, you're underneath a lot of pressure because you have to make decisions in a very quick decisions in a very short amount of time. And I think those pressures kind of teach you how to act during certain times, or whilst you're in different kinds of pressures. So I think that's important. I also use the example of being able to train your emotions as well. And I feel like the disciplines of martial arts and sports give you that as well. I don't think it's just within fighting sports, but I believe it goes across sports as well. Understanding that sometimes you might be an angry person, but being able to transfer that anger into positive energy to then perform on the pitch or perform in the ring, depending on what type of sport that you do. So you would then understand that sometimes you might be angry, but if you kind of learn to say, you know what, me being angry isn't actually going to benefit me or get to my desired destination. So sometimes you might be angry and you lose your head in the ring or you lose your head on a pitch. You then reflect and realize that this hasn't done anything for me. So the next time around, you then understand that the best thing for me is, if I'm going to get angry, allow me to suppress my anger and use it in a better way, rather than use it to like while out or do something that doesn't benefit you. And I'll say that comes from a repetition of constantly putting yourself in certain environments that allows you to kind of test yourself and kind of see what pushes you to your certain limits. And it will then give you the ability to identify some of the things that you want to get stronger in. I would also say it also depends on the type of things that you're hearing day to day as well about yourself. I know that me growing up and the coach that I had, the type of words that he will give us, he will kind of give us words that help us to understand that anything is possible and nothing is impossible. It all depends on when you decide to place your focus. And many years of kind of doing so, what you would find is that you will always place yourself, or you always focus on being the best or trying to be the best at something, whether it be in a taekwondo class, whether it be in a boxing class, whether it be in a football team. whether it be at school, whether it be in your business or anything else that you're trying to do. It kind of gave me that positive mindset that you can achieve anything that you kind of want to achieve. And to do so, you know that you're going to have to put yourself underneath a certain kind of pressure, a certain kind of testing constantly in order to achieve that level or achieve that height of what you're trying to achieve. So I believe that the training of the mind takes, I won't say it's an overnight thing. It's not just watching a movie and getting the confidence to go and do something. I think it actually is something that you have to train yourself. And I think the best way to train yourself is by attaching yourself to a people or a person that's gone through a certain process themselves, so they can actually show you the way. And that's why I'm actually able to proudly say that some of my students who were once bullied are no longer bullied. They are now able to defend themselves and actually act accordingly in some of those situations. Because I've been through a process of being able to train my mind, and now they too have now shown the evidence of being able to actually defend themselves underneath a certain kind of pressure. So that's what I would say.
Yeah, no, that's great, Faye. And you know what? Look, we're going to move on to the final question now to conclude this interview. But what I will say, I'm going to reference what you said about the training and the constant training of the mind. And I'll reference it against two things. When I got a bit older, around the age of 20 or so, I was in university at the time, and I started doing Kung Fu. And the master of the school said, actually, you could train in a martial art, but that doesn't necessarily make you a fighter. And he said something which is true, and I found to be true, just living life and what I experienced in life. He said, in order to be a fighter, you're either usually born that way or something makes you that way. And it sounds like the training of the mind that you're talking about is to train people to be that disciplined so that they are able to do that kind of thing. And then the last thing that I would say about it really is that, you know, when I was younger, around the age of 14 or so, I had a lot of problems with the gangs in my school, basically, and in my local area. And it got to a point where I felt to myself, I need to be able to stand up for myself. It took me about a year, because I was the type of person, like you said, fight or flight. There's a third type of response, which is called freeze. And I used to freeze a lot of the time when I was in a violent situation or an aggressive one. And I got tired of freezing in the middle of this, because I couldn't respond and defend myself in any particular way. It took me like a year of constantly going into my mind and training my mind. So I got to the point where if somebody threw me a punch, I was able to throw a punch back. And it took a year of my mind constantly going through it and constantly reshaping its natural responses to situations. Some of that was good, some of that was bad. You know, in some ways, it kind of, I wish I shouldn't have really had to be different from the way I was anyway, which is not a confrontational person. But then at the same time, you know, it may be seen as helpful if you're able to defend yourself if guys come and attack you. Sometimes that can save your life in certain situations. Like, you know, the brick situation I was talking to you about earlier. So that's why I just wanted to preference against what you were saying. Yeah. But so the final question I'm going to ask you about this, and I think it's a good round off to this interview, is what is your philosophy in terms of the use of violence and its purpose in self-defense as a whole?
The use of violence and self-defense.
The use of violence and its purpose within self-defense.
Okay. I would probably say that violence itself necessarily kind of means intentionally trying to inflict pain on another person. And I say within the idea of self-defense, I don't think that's actually particularly involved, because the whole point is defending yourself first. So you always think about defending yourself first, not intentionally trying to inflict pain on others. However, in a lot of situations, if I'm being honest with you, to actually defend yourself might actually mean that you actually have to inflict pain on another person. So I definitely believe that it actually does play a role. But I would never say that it's an intentional intentional pain that you're trying to inflict, trying to hurt the person. It's more or less that you have to inflict the pain in order for the person to stop. For example, in your situation that you said that somebody picked up a brick, you had to then actually punch the guy in the face in order for him to actually then drop the brick, you know. in my own situation or other situation that I've seen, that when someone actually had a knife, it had to be a fight in order for me to make sure that it's not as worse as it was, if that makes sense. So I would definitely say that sometimes intentionally you have to you have to inflict that pain on another person to defend yourself. But I wouldn't say it's the fundamental thing in self-defense. The first thing about self-defense and actually first learning how to say, you know what, I need to get myself out of danger. So sometimes, let's say, for example, somebody punched me, my first response is to move out of the way or move the fist away. You know, boxers will call that parry, you know, or a different martial arts will call that a block. You do that, but you know somebody's coming again. In order to stop them, it actually might mean that you actually then have to hit them or do something for them to stop. So I think that's the role that violence plays in self-defense. But saying again that the first point of self-defense is actually first looking at your safety. And if it then requires that your safety now requires for you to then actually inflict pain on another person, then you're going to have to do so, if I'm being honest with you. So sometimes I would tell my students that if somebody's causing you problems at school and you've been defending yourself, it means that you are going to have to hit them for them to get the message that this is not a joke now. You know, and that's just the honest truth. If things do end up in a fight within school, but I'll never tell them go and start a fight with this person, because that doesn't make sense. You know, it's only if you're being bothered and to the point where you now have to do so, like I've explained earlier, in the previous lives or in the same life that's just been extended now, that some of my students actually had to kick somebody in the face or throw somebody on the floor for them to hurt themselves, for them to say that, hey, this is not a joke anymore. They had to do that in order for the person that was trying to inflict pain on them, for them to understand that I don't want to fight. Stop it now. You know. So yeah, that's what I'd say is the role of violence within self-defense.
Listen, thank you for that, Faith. You know, that brings our interview to a good close. Again, look, thank you for coming and actually discussing all of this with us, because you know, I found it very interesting, and you've taught me quite a few things. I hope you've taught others quite a few things as well after they've been watching this.
Hopefully, definitely.
Yeah, and again, thank you everyone for joining us. You know, I would just like to reiterate, we're not trying to provide advice to you on what to do in these situations. We're just having a discussion about this so that you get greater insight to what this is all about, what young people are experiencing. And also, you know, the real ways that you deal with this. You go and find an instructor. And if you are in a violent situation, you run, or you find a public space, as Faye said, so somebody can't use that kind of thing, like if they're going to use a weapon. But that is as far as our advice extends on this. We're not telling people what to do in this situation. But yeah, listen, so, yeah, thank you, everyone.
No problem. I would also say is that as well, if you can check the Pulse Academy page as well, I have actually done a demonstration. I wouldn't say necessarily this is the first thing that you do for self-defense, but it gives you insight towards our sports and the confidence that I can give you. So if you can check our latest post, I think I posted a tutorial on how to do a certain kick. And that's just for you guys to maybe practice at home, or have a look at what's involved in our sport. That may attract you and then give you the booster to say, you know what, let me actually learn a martial art. Let me go and do something new today. So yeah, that's what I would say.
That's great. Listen, thank you again, Faye, and thank you everyone for joining us. I guess we'll see you on future lives, everyone. Take care.
Definitely. Thank you for allowing me to come on today.
No problem.